Apologize to her or leave. That was my son's ultimatum. He said it with his jaw clenched, like he was doing something brave. But there was nothing courageous about throwing your mother under the bus for the sake of dinner decorum. The roast chicken still steamed in the center of the table. I had brought lemon thyme from my garden, thinking it might be a nice touch. Verena wrinkled her nose at it earlier. Smells a bit sharp, don't you think she'd said loud enough for everyone to hear? I didn't respond. I didn't say anything when she made a joke about how people who didn't grow up with good taste always over-seasoned their food. I didn't flinch when she rolled her eyes at the casserole I brought, or when she kept talking about her daughter's real family dinners right in front of me. I stayed quiet for Eli. But then she pulled out her phone, said her brooch was missing, showed a photo of it, gold with a small sapphire at the center. I had it when I came in. Now it's gone. Strange, right? She didn't have to say anything else. She turned toward me with a long, deliberate glance. And Eli? He looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. He didn't ask. He didn't check. He just stood up and said it. Apologize to her or leave. Verena folded her arms, lips curled at the corners. Triumphant. I looked at my son, the boy I raised alone, the boy I worked weekends for, the boy I thought would never be capable of this. I stood, folded my napkin, straightened the silver ring on my finger. You'll regret this. 3 words, spoken softly, without heat. Then I walked out of the house. I helped them by past the garden I had planted and down the path I had paved. I didn't look back. But I did write everything down when I got home. Every comment, every wire transfer, every signature. I'm not dramatic. I'm Clarice. I used to shelve books and organize author visits for second graders. I used to bake on Fridays and collect stamps with Eli on Sunday mornings. My late husband Henry passed when Eli was only 10. I held our little world together with a quiet kind of grit no one ever applauds. And I never asked for applause. When Eli got engaged, I thought, this is what love looks like continuing. I gave him $90,000 for the down payment on the house. Not a loan, a gift. He said they'd always remember it. They didn't. After the wedding, things shifted like wallpaper, peeling in a humid room, slow then all at once. Verena took over the holidays. First Thanksgiving, then Christmas. Then even Eli's birthday hosted at her family's cabin 3 states away. I wasn't invited. Oh, it's not personal, Eli said once. She just likes things a certain way. I was taken off the shared grocery app. I stopped getting calls about furniture choices or baby names. They hadn't even decided if they'd have children, but she already referred to herself as the future matriarch. I tried not to take it to heart. I stayed quiet. Brought food when invited. Listened more than I spoke, but after that dinner, I saw it for what it was. It wasn't thoughtlessness. It was intent. Verena wasn't trying to coexist. She was trying to erase me. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out a file folder. Printed bank statements, property documents, screenshots of old texts and emails where Eli had written, "Thanks again, Mom. We couldn't have done this without you." I made a list of everything I'd given from the down payment to the antique bookshelf I'd let them borrow for their guest room. And then I made a second list, what was still legally mine. That's when I remembered the title. I had never signed the final release. My name was still on the house. And the brooch Verena claimed I stole, I'd seen it before, in a very different place. The brooch Verena claimed I stole was never hers to mourn. 3 days after that dinner, I found it. An estate seller listed it online. Same photograph. Same shallow scratch across the clasp. Same serial number stamped beneath the pin. I didn't have to wonder, I knew. She hadn't misplaced it. She hadn't dropped it under a cushion or set it in a strange pocket. She had planted it, The accusation wasn't clumsy or emotional, it was rehearsed. She waited until dessert, waited until everyone was full and warm and lulled by the wine. Then she claimed something precious was missing, glanced my way like it was an afterthought, and watched the room tighten around me. The performance was clean, but so was the paper trail. I started with my own transfers. I pulled every confirmation email from the day Eli called me and said they found the perfect place. I still had the draft agreement where he asked if I wanted to stay on the deed just in case. I had said yes, and we never updated it. No one ever bothered to remove me. I still owned half that house. Then came the receipts. Wedding expenses paid in my name, utilities I'd covered their first winter, the washer and dryer I'd helped replace after their old ones flooded the garage. None of it was hidden. None of it had strings. But now I understood people like Verena only respect boundaries written in ink. I made copies, labeled folders, created a timeline. And when I had all of it lined up, when the facts were sharper than the shame she tried to place on me, I called a lawyer. No warnings, no late-night calls to Eli, no letters through the grapevine. Just one quiet consultation. The lawyer asked me if I wanted to pursue damages. I said no, not yet. I only wanted to reclaim what was mine. But before we filed anything, I received a letter from the bank about a lien on the property. One I hadn't agreed to. One I hadn't even known existed. The envelope was thin. Just one page inside. A notice from the bank. Notification of a lien placed against the property on Elmwood Drive, my property. At first, I thought it was an error, but the reference number matched. The address matched. My name was there listed as co-owner, which meant I was entitled to the notice. The loan had been processed 2 months earlier. $42,000. Secured against the home. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't been consulted, but someone had signed for me. I looked closer at the signature. It was mine, but off. Tilted slightly wrong, the C too wide, the M too narrow. It was a forgery. Verena had faked my consent. I called the lender. Calm voice. Asked simple questions. They told me the documents were submitted electronically, that the borrower had provided verified identification. When I requested copies, they hesitated until I reminded them I was still legally tied to the deed. When the PDFs arrived, I opened them with shaking hands. And there it was, Verena's name listed first, Eli's second, and a scanned copy of what was supposed to be my signature. They hadn't even spelled my middle name right. I printed it, added it to the growing file. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just highlighted the parts that proved fraud and slid them behind a labeled tab. My lawyer agreed. Grounds for civil action were clear, but I wasn't ready to go nuclear yet. So I waited. I didn't tell Eli. Didn't confront Verena. I wanted to see how far she was willing to go. What more she thought she could take. It didn't take long. A week later, I received a message from Eli. He wanted to talk, said he'd bring dinner, that he missed me. I told him to come by Friday, and I made sure the file sat on the corner of the table where I could see it, just in case I needed to show him who still owned the ground he stood on. Eli arrived just before sunset, holding a cardboard box, like it was a peace offering he wasn't sure I'd accept. He didn't knock right away. I watched him from the window as he stood there, shoulders slumped, staring at the door like he was rehearsing lines he hadn't learned. I brought dinner, he said. When I opened it, from that place you like. I didn't know what you'd want. I stepped aside and let him in. He set the box on the counter unopened. He looked thinner than I remembered. His eyes were rimmed with gray shadows, his jaw unshaven. He said he'd been working too much, that he missed me, that things at home were tense. I listened. I didn't fill the silence for him. After a moment, he sighed and rubbed his hands together. I know last week was a lot. It's complicated, Mom. You know how Verena is. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just a shrug, wrapped in exhaustion. I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from him. I spoke to a lawyer, I said evenly. I'll be filing a notice of intent to reclaim partial control of the house. He blinked like he hadn't heard me correctly. What? The property, I said. My name is still on it. There's a lien I didn't authorize. I won't let that stand. His confusion hardened into anger. You can't do that. That's our home. Our, I repeated quietly. His voice rose, then cracked. Why are you doing this now? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something steady settle in my chest. Because silence stopped protecting me. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something raw. Fear. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then stood abruptly. I need to go, he said. I didn't expect this. I know, I replied. He left the food behind untouched, and when the door closed, I didn't rush to pick it up. I sat there listening to the quiet, knowing that whatever came next wouldn't be resolved with boxed dinners or careful words, but with consequences already in motion. The letter went out on a Tuesday, certified, signed, stamped. My attorney said it was straightforward, a formal notice to assert my legal rights over the property. Not a threat, not a lawsuit. Just a line drawn clearly in ink, the kind Verena could no longer smudge. By Friday, she was gone. She didn't slam the door or leave in a dramatic rage. She simply vanished. Cleared out their joint account, took her clothes, her jewelry, and left a typed note taped to the inside of the bedroom closet. Eli found it when he went looking for her shoes. In it, she wrote that she'd tried everything, that he had failed to protect their future, and that she refused to be dragged down by emotional dead weight. Then came the part that stopped me cold. You should have let your mother go when I told you to. You're too weak. Always have been. Still clinging to a woman like that. A woman like that. Eli didn't call that day. Not the next. I heard nothing until Monday afternoon, when a quiet knock pulled me from the laundry room. He stood there empty-handed, no dinner, no excuse. Just silence and sagging eyes. I didn't know, he said, barely louder than a breath. I held the door open and stepped aside. He sat on the edge of the sofa like he didn't know if he was allowed to stay. She handled everything he said. The paperwork, the accounts. I just trusted her. I nodded slowly. I know. We sat in silence for a long time. I didn't ask where he was sleeping. I didn't offer him a bed. He had questions. I didn't answer them all. Not yet. But I brought him tea and I didn't send him away. When he left, he looked back once at the door. Not in anger, not in shame, but in something closer to grief. I didn't wave. That night, I filed the next round of paperwork, quietly reclaiming control, while he tried to salvage what she'd left behind. The house was legally frozen within 2 weeks of Verena's disappearance. My attorney moved swiftly, filing the necessary documents to halt any sale refinance or further liens. The title was reviewed. The forged signature flagged. I initiated the buyback. It wasn't easy. I had to prove contribution, co-ownership, and long-term intent. But I had the paper trail. Years of silent generosity finally counted for something. Eli still had options. He could have refinanced under his name alone. Tried to salvage his half, but the numbers didn't lie. Verena had drained their account, maxed out their cards, and taken loans against vehicles and furniture I didn't even know they owned. He was underwater. When the notice arrived, he came to see me, eyes dull but resigned. He didn't argue. Just said, I'll pack this weekend. He didn't ask for help and I didn't offer. I gave him space to do what needed to be done. He moved into a 1-bedroom rental across town, small but clean. Close enough that I'd still see him if I wanted to. Far enough that he'd feel the distance. I returned to the house quietly. The paint on the porch rails was chipped. The backyard overgrown. The hydrangeas I planted 5 years ago were still there, buried beneath weeds trying to bloom again. I took off my shoes at the door, wiped the counters, opened all the windows. I didn't throw anything out that first week. I just cleaned, reclaimed. I moved a few of my old things back in a blanket from my reading chair. The framed photo of Henry and Eli at his high school graduation. The wooden measuring spoons I'd kept since our first apartment. I didn't make announcements, didn't post a thing. I just returned to what was mine. The mailbox still had my name on it. I peeled Verina's sticker off the inside flap. That afternoon, I found a notice in the junk drawer, a reminder about a late payment on the lien. One more loose end she'd left behind, and one I now had the power to settle. I cooked on a Wednesday evening, not because it was a holiday, or because I was trying to prove anything, but because the house was quiet, and I wanted it to feel lived in again. I chose simple food, the kind you make when you don't need praise for it. No table settings, no extra plates, just enough. Eli arrived early. He didn't bring anything, and for once that felt right. He rolled up his sleeves without being asked and stood at the sink, rinsing vegetables like it was something he'd done his whole life. We worked side by side without talking much. There was a comfort in that silence, thin but real. During dinner, he ate slowly, eyes down, as if he was afraid of taking up too much space. When I stood to clear the table, he followed me into the kitchen and started washing dishes before I could reach the sink. He wiped the counter, swept the floor, even took the trash out without being told. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. We sat afterward with cups of tea, the room filled with the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the floorboards. He didn't talk about Verina. He didn't talk about the house. He just asked how I was sleeping, whether my knees still ached in the mornings, if I'd been reading anything good lately. Before he left, he stood by the door, hands in his pockets, hesitating. "Would you ever trust me again?" he asked quietly. I looked at him for a long moment. The question wasn't dramatic. It was fragile. I didn't answer right away. "Trust isn't something you ask for," I finally said. "It's something you show." He nodded, like he understood, or at least like he was willing to learn. As he stepped outside, I watched him pause at the end of the walkway, turning back once before walking into the dark, and I wondered what parts of us could still be rebuilt and which ones were gone for good. I forgave Eli in the same way he broke my heart quietly. Not with a speech, not with a tearful embrace, and not because he had fully earned it, but because I didn't want to carry the bitterness any longer. I had seen what resentment did to people like Verina, how it warped love into control, pride into cruelty. I refused to let it twist me too. Forgiveness for me meant loosening my grip on the pain, not forgetting it, not excusing it, just choosing not to bleed from it every time I saw his face. He visits now, not every day and never with expectation. Sometimes he brings groceries. Sometimes he comes over just to fix something small, a crooked shutter, a squeaky hinge. He doesn't talk much about what happened, but he listens more than he used to. He never asks for anything, not money, not favors. He doesn't even park in the driveway unless I tell him to. I keep the deed in a drawer near the kitchen, along with a folder of documents I now know how to read. I don't rush through contracts. I don't sign papers under pressure. And I don't let anyone else speak on my behalf. That part of me trusting to a fault has been replaced by something sturdier. Eli knows that now. He sees the caution in me, and he doesn't argue with it. He just keeps showing up, trying to build something steady from the mess he let grow too long. I still have bad days. Days when I remember the dinner table, the accusations, the way he didn't defend me. But those memories no longer own me. Forgiveness isn't a door swinging open. It's a boundary quietly redrawn. And I've redrawn mine in ink. When he asked last week if I wanted company for the weekend, I said yes. Not because I needed help, but because I wanted to see if he would show up again for no reason, but to stay. He did. And this time, he brought his own tools and a bag of groceries. Eli asked me once softly, in the middle of folding laundry, if I ever regretted saying those 3 words. I didn't hesitate. No, you'll regret this. I hadn't shouted it. I hadn't slammed a door behind me. I'd said it the way a mother says something she knows will land later, after the silence, after the pride, after the damage. It wasn't a curse. It was a mirror. He was the one who'd have to decide what to do with the reflection. I never wanted him to suffer. That's the thing people don't understand about mothers. We don't want revenge. We want understanding. We want our children to look back and finally see not the things we gave, but the weight we carried to give them. These days, Eli still comes by. Sometimes we share a meal. Sometimes we just sit on the porch, saying nothing. He watches the trees. I watch him. He never brings up Verena anymore, and I never ask if he hears from her. That chapter has closed not in flames, but in silence. I live quietly now. The house feels like mine again, not just in paperwork, but in presence. I bake when I feel like it. I read on the couch with the sun at my back. I open the windows when it rains, and when Eli brings up his future, I listen, but I don't offer solutions. I've learned where my place ends. I don't leave my doors wide open anymore. But I haven't locked them either. Trust can return, not as it was, but in new shape. Earned slower, with eyes open. He's trying. I see that. And I no longer carry the ache of being dismissed. It's still there, the memory of it, but it doesn't rule me. The 3 words I said that night weren't the end. They were the beginning of everything I refused to lose again.